Lucille Ball, the fiery redhead who changed television forever, spent decades making the world laugh. But in her final interview, filmed just months before her passing, there was something different in her eyes. It wasn't the mischievous sparkle that fans had adored since I Love Lucy first hit the screens. Instead, there was a quiet weight, a bittersweet honesty that left everyone watching in tears. For most people, Lucille Ball was larger than life, the queen of comedy, the fearless pioneer who smashed barriers when Hollywood didn't think a woman could lead a show, run a studio, or command an audience of millions. But in that last sit-down, she peeled back the curtain. She spoke not as the legend Lucy, but as Lucille, a woman who had lived, loved, lost, and learned the hard truths that fame could never protect her from. She reflected on her earliest struggles, when producers told her she wasn't pretty enough for film and not funny enough for radio. She talked about the courage it took to fight for her marriage with Desi in the heartbreak of realizing love alone couldn't save it. She admitted the loneliness that followed her even in rooms filled with applause. But the moment that truly broke viewers came near the end, when she shared what she wished she had done differently and what she hoped people would remember her for. Her voice cracked, her eyes shimmered, and for once, the woman who brought laughter to millions revealed the pain she carried quietly behind the scenes. By the time the interview faded to black, the room was silent. No jokes, no punchlines, just a raw, emotional goodbye from a woman whose final message turned into one of the most powerful moments in television history. Before the world saw Lucille Ball as the unstoppable force of comedy, the woman who lit up black and white screens and changed television forever, she was simply Lucy, a girl from Jamestown, New York, with big dreams and even bigger obstacles. And in her final interview, she revisited those early days with a softness that few had ever seen. She began by talking about her childhood, not with the usual nostalgia celebrities lean on, but with an honesty that surprised even her interviewer. "I wasn't born into glamour," she said, her voice carrying the tremble of old memories. Her father died when she was just 3 years old, leaving her mother overwhelmed and struggling to keep the family afloat. Those early losses stayed with her, shaping her long before Hollywood ever did. Lucille recalled how she was always drawn to performing, not because she wanted fame, but because she wanted to feel alive. Laughing was survival, she admitted. If I could make someone laugh, anyone, then the world felt a little less heavy. Yet the world didn't open its arms easily. When she arrived in New York City as a teenager, studio agents dismissed her instantly. Too tall, too awkward, too emotional, too everything that Hollywood didn't know how to market. But she kept going. In the interview, she described how every no carved her into someone stronger. She took any job she could. Modeling gigs that paid little, chorus lines where she felt invisible, acting classes where teachers claimed she lacked natural talent. Those comments might have crushed another young woman, but for Lucille they fueled a fire. She wanted to prove them wrong, not out of bitterness, but because she believed she had something more to offer. Then came the moment she first stepped into radio and later television. Two mediums that would not just change her life, but the entire entertainment landscape. She spoke softly about the early days of I Love Lucy, remembering how unsure she was whether audiences would accept her. "I wasn't glamorous," she said with a mild laugh. "I was goofy, clumsy, loud, but people saw themselves in that. And that saved me." The interview took an emotional turn when she spoke about Desi. Her eyes softened when she described their early love. Fiery, passionate, magnetic. "We were a storm," she whispered. Together they built Desi, the studio that would eventually produce some of the most iconic shows in American history. But building an empire came at a cost. "We loved each other," she said slowly. "We just couldn't live together." As she spoke, she didn't hide the pain. The cracks in her voice were subtle but unmistakable. She admitted that the divorce left a void in her life that she never fully filled. Yet she also spoke with gratitude, not regret. She acknowledged that, without Desi, there would be no Lucy Ricardo, no groundbreaking sitcom, no revolution in television production. "He believed in me before anyone else did," she said softly. Near the end of Chapter 1's portion of the interview, Lucille paused. Her hands trembled slightly, and for a moment She seemed lost in memories. "People think my life was all laughter," she said. "But laughter is something you earn. Mine came from places of pain, of strength, of survival. The truth behind the legend, raw, human, imperfect, was finally coming to light." And by the time she finished that thought, even the interviewer struggled to hold back emotion. Because this wasn't the Lucy the world knew. This was the real Lucille Ball, vulnerable and reflective, letting the world see the woman behind the spotlight for the very last time. As the final interview continued, the tone grew even more intimate. Lucille Ball had spent decades perfecting the art of comedy, convincing the world that laughter came easily to her. But in this moment, she revealed the truth that few ever knew. Making millions laugh had come with a heavy personal cost. The interviewer gently asked her when she first realized she had become a legend. Lucille gave a weary smile, one that hinted at both pride and exhaustion. "People were calling me that long before I felt like one," she said. "To me, I was just working harder than anyone realized." She explained how I Love Lucy didn't succeed because of luck. It succeeded because she and Desi poured their lives into it. Long nights, endless rewrites, rehearsals that stretched far beyond normal hours. She pushed herself to limits most people never saw. "Comedy looks light," she said, "but it's the heaviest thing I've ever carried." But beneath the professional dedication, there was another struggle, one that left a deeper mark. Lucille admitted that the pressure to always be funny, always be perfect, always be America's sweetheart, weighed on her more than any physical exhaustion. She spoke openly about how the world adored Lucy Ricardo, the character, but rarely stopped to wonder how Lucille Ball felt beneath that image. "There were days," she confessed, "when I would finish a scene full of laughter, then go to my dressing room and cry." She wasn't ashamed to say it. Instead, she offered it as a reminder that even the strongest performers have cracks the audience never sees. The interview shifted again when she talked about motherhood. Perhaps the most emotional subject of all for her. She admitted that the demands of her career often collided with her desire to be present for her children. "I wasn't always there the way I should have been," she said, her voice tightening. "My kids didn't get Lucy Ricardo. They got Lucille, tired and trying her best." It was one of the few moments she seemed truly fragile, like the weight of regret had followed her through every stage of her life. She also spoke of the years after her divorce from Desi. People often believed she flourished independently once she became the sole leader of Desilu, but even success brought loneliness. "There's a kind of silence that comes at night," she said. "The kind only someone who's lost a great love really understands." It wasn't bitterness in her tone. It was acceptance, the kind that only arrives after decades of reflection. Then came the part of the interview that unexpectedly broke viewers. Lucille began describing what it felt like to grow old in an industry that worships youth. Her voice softened as she explained how Hollywood, once a place that seemed to revolve around her, eventually moved on without looking back. "You spend your whole life trying to stand in the spotlight," she said. "Then one day you realize the light isn't pointed at you anymore. But what truly moved people wasn't the sadness, it was her strength." Lucille didn't sound angry or defeated. Instead, she spoke with remarkable clarity and gratitude for the career she had lived, the risks she had taken, and the lives she had touched. "I don't want people to remember me as perfect," she said in a trembling voice. "I want them to remember that I showed up. I gave everything I had. I loved deeply, even when it hurt." By the end of this part of the interview, the room felt heavy. Not because Lucille Ball was broken, but because she was finally being seen, fully and honestly, as the human being behind the legend. As the cameras continued rolling, Lucille Ball turned toward a topic she had rarely confronted so directly: love. Not the scripted kind she performed on television, not the comedic chaos of Lucy and Ricky, but the real love she experienced, the kind that shaped her, challenged her, and stayed with her long after it was gone. The interviewer asked carefully, "Do you think you ever truly stopped loving Desi?" Lucille exhaled slowly, as though releasing a truth she had held in for decades. "No," she whispered. "Not for a moment." Her eyes glistened as she revisited the beginning, The electric connection she felt the first time she saw Desi, a young Cuban bandleader bursting with charm and confidence. She described their early romance like a firework, brilliant, wild, impossible to ignore. They married quickly, holding on to each other through the chaos of show business, immigration struggles, and cultural differences that Hollywood wasn't ready to understand. But even in her recollection, there was no attempt to rewrite the past. Lucille didn't hide the flaws. "We were passionate," she said, "but passion burns hot, and sometimes it burns everything around it. Their arguments, their jealousy, the pressures of building Desi together, she spoke of all of it with a painful clarity. We were two people with dreams bigger than the room," she said, "and sometimes big dreams don't leave space for two hearts." She paused, fighting back emotion. The interviewer didn't interrupt. This was the moment everyone would remember. "What people never understood," Lucille continued, "was that our divorce wasn't the end of our love. It was the end of our fighting. It was the only way to stop hurting each other." She explained how, after their split, she and Desi maintained a bond rooted in respect and deep affection. They called each other often. They celebrated holidays with their children. When Desi struggled with health issues later in life, Lucille was there, quietly, privately, away from cameras and headlines. "I never stopped caring," she said softly. "He was the father of my children. He was the man who believed in me. He was my partner in every way that mattered." The most heart-wrenching moment came when she spoke about Desi's final years. She revealed that, despite everything, they had shared some of their most honest conversations near the end of his life. "He told me he was proud of me," she whispered. "And I told him I was proud of him too." Her voice cracked. A tear slipped down her cheek, and even the camera operator, trying to stay professional, wiped his eyes. Lucille admitted that she often replayed those conversations in her mind, especially in moments of quiet. "Love doesn't disappear just because life gets complicated," she said. "Some loves stay with you. They become part of your bones." The interview room was silent, as if everyone collectively understood they were witnessing history. Not the bright, comedic history of "I Love Lucy," but the emotional truth behind the legend. Then she said something that left viewers shattered. "If I could live one day again," she murmured. "Just one. I'd pick a day when we were young, before the fame, before the fights. A day when we were just Lucy and Desi, laughing, dreaming, believing the world was ours." It wasn't a line rehearsed for cameras, not a sentimental performance. It was a confession from a woman who had lived a life full of laughter, but carried a heart shaped by loss, longing, and a love she never stopped feeling. By the time Chapter 3's segment of the interview ended, Lucille Ball had given the world something far more powerful than comedy. She had given them the truth of her heart. As the final minutes of the interview approached, something shifted in the room. The air grew still, the lights seemed softer, and Lucille Ball, the woman who had spent her entire life under the glare of cameras, appeared suddenly fragile. Not weak, but peaceful, like she understood this was her last chance to speak directly to the world she had entertained for decades. The interviewer asked gently, "If you could say one last thing to your fans, what would it be?" Lucille smiled, and for a moment the familiar sparkle returned. But this time, it wasn't the exaggerated comedic glint that defined her on-screen persona. It was something deeper: gratitude, humility, and a lifetime of memories wrapped into one expression. "I want them to know I heard them," she said. Every laugh, every letter, every time someone said I brightened their day. I heard it, and it meant more than they'll ever know. She explained that fame had never been her goal. She never imagined she would become a trailblazer or an icon. She simply wanted to work, to survive, to make people smile. "If I helped someone forget their troubles for even a few minutes," she whispered, "then I did what I was meant to do." Lucille paused as if measuring her next words. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. "People think I gave them laughter," she continued. "But the truth is, they gave me life. The audience saved me more than once." The interviewer, visibly emotional, asked her what she hoped her legacy would be. Lucille thought for a long moment, long enough that the entire room held its breath. "I hope they remember I tried," she said finally. I tried to be brave. I tried to be kind. I tried to love deeply. And I tried to make this world a little lighter while I was here. Her voice grew quiet, cracks forming with each word. She spoke about aging, about watching her friends leave the world one by one, about the loneliness that creeps into a performer's life when the spotlight fades. It's strange, she said, to live a life where millions know your face, but only a handful know your heart. Then came the moment that left viewers crying, the moment that felt like Lucille Ball saying farewell, not just to the audience, but to life itself. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes reflecting years of laughter, heartbreak, triumph, and loss. If this is the last time people see me, she said softly, I want them to know. I loved being Lucy. I loved making you laugh. And I loved this life, even when it hurt. Silence filled the room. Not a single person, not the interviewer, not the crew, not anyone watching later, could avoid the sting of emotion. This wasn't a sitcom scene. This was Lucille Ball, the icon, the pioneer, the woman, saying goodbye in the only way she knew how, honestly. She ended with one final message, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for letting me be part of your lives. And thank you for being the joy in mine. When the cameras stopped, no one moved. Lucille simply sat there, breathing quietly, as though releasing a weight she had carried for decades. Some say she wiped a tear. Others say she smiled. But everyone agreed on one thing. It was the most human, most vulnerable moment of her entire career. Within months, Lucille Ball was gone. But that final interview, raw and sincere, became her lasting gift to the world. A reminder that behind every legend is a fragile heart, and behind every laugh is a story.